Marcus Wellington stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, gazing down at the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he had conquered. At 42 years old, he had built an empire that most people could only dream about. Wellington Industries had its fingers in everything from real estate to technology, from luxury hotels to cutting-edge pharmaceuticals. His net worth had recently crossed $12 billion, a figure that continued to climb with each passing quarter. The morning sun reflected off the glass and steel buildings that dotted the skyline, many of which bore his company's name. Marcus adjusted his custom-tailored Italian suit and checked his platinum watch, a gift he had bought himself after closing a particularly lucrative deal in Singapore. Everything in his life was measured, calculated, and controlled. He had worked tirelessly for 20 years to reach this position, sacrificing relationships, personal happiness, and countless hours of sleep to build his fortune. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom on his desk. "Mr. Wellington, your 10 o'clock is here. The quarterly review with the board members." Marcus turned from the window, his expression hardening into the mask he wore for business. "Send them in 5 minutes. I need to review the projections one more time." He sat down at his massive mahogany desk, opening the leather portfolio that contained the financial reports. The numbers were good, better than good actually. Profits were up 18% from the previous quarter. Shareholders would be pleased. The board would have nothing to complain about. Everything was proceeding exactly according to his plan. Yet as Marcus reviewed the figures, he felt an emptiness gnawing at him, a sensation he had been experiencing more frequently in recent months. He pushed the feeling aside. Emotions were weaknesses, vulnerabilities that could be exploited in the cutthroat world of business. He had learned that lesson early in his career when a moment of sentimentality had nearly cost him his first major deal. The day progressed in its usual pattern of meetings, conference calls, and decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. By 7 in the evening, Marcus finally returned to his mansion in the exclusive hillside community where only the wealthiest families resided. The estate sprawled across 5 acres, featuring manicured gardens, a tennis court, an Olympic-sized pool, and a main house with 23 rooms. As his driver pulled up to the entrance, Marcus noticed unfamiliar activity near the service entrance. His head housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, was interviewing someone. He made a mental note to ask about it later. Staff matters were typically beneath his attention, but he liked to know everything that happened on his property. Marcus entered through the main doors, immediately greeted by the cool air conditioning and the faint scent of fresh flowers that were arranged daily throughout the house. He loosened his tie and headed toward his private study, a sanctuary where he often worked late into the night. "Mr. Wellington," Mrs. Patterson's voice called out, causing him to pause. The elderly woman hurried toward him, slightly out of breath. "I apologize for interrupting, but I wanted to inform you that we've hired a new member for the housekeeping staff. The young woman I mentioned last week who came highly recommended." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Fine. Whatever you think is necessary. You handle those matters." "Of course, sir. Her name is Rose Henderson. She'll be starting with the evening shift, primarily handling the East Wing and the library. Very quiet, very efficient. I thought you should know." Marcus nodded absently, already thinking about the reports waiting for him in his study. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." He spent the next 3 hours reviewing contracts and responding to emails from his international offices. The work consumed him, as it always did, providing a distraction from thoughts he preferred not to entertain. Thoughts about the emptiness of his mansion, the silence that filled every room despite housing 8 staff members, the lack of anyone to share his success with. At nearly midnight, Marcus finally set aside his work and decided to get something from the kitchen. The house was quiet, most of the staff having retired for the evening. As he walked through the dimly lit corridors, he heard the soft sound of someone humming. Following the sound, he found himself near the library. Through the partially open door, he saw her. A young black woman, probably in her late 20s, was carefully dusting the bookshelves. She worked with meticulous attention, treating each book as if it were precious. What caught Marcus's attention was not just her care and dedication at such a late hour, but the song she was humming. It was hauntingly familiar, triggering a memory he couldn't quite place. The woman reached up to dust a higher shelf, and her sleeve slipped back slightly. Even from a distance, Marcus caught a glimpse of something on her wrist. A bracelet. His breath caught in his throat. He moved closer, drawn by an inexplicable force. Rose sensed his presence and turned quickly, startled. "Oh, Mr. Wellington, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize anyone was still awake. I can come back later to finish this room." "No, it's fine," Marcus said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. His eyes were fixed on her wrist. "That bracelet. Where did you get it?" Rose instinctively covered her wrist with her other hand, a protective gesture. "It was my mother's, sir. It's been in my family for a very long time." Marcus felt his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. "May I see it? Please." Rose hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the request, but she slowly extended her arm. The bracelet was simple yet distinctive, made of braided leather with 3 small silver charms: a bird, a book, and a tiny house. But what made Marcus's blood run cold was the inscription on the small silver plate attached to the leather. Even in the dim library light, he could see it. "To Grace, with all my love. Forever yours." The room seemed to spin around Marcus. He gripped the edge of a nearby chair to steady himself. 28 years. It had been 28 years since he had last seen that bracelet, since he had crafted it with his own teenage hands in a jewelry-making class, since he had given it to the girl who had owned his heart completely. "Grace," he whispered, the name he hadn't spoken aloud in decades. "Grace Morrison." Rose's eyes widened in shock. "That was my mother's name. But how could you possibly know that? She passed away 3 years ago, and she never mentioned knowing anyone named Wellington." Marcus felt his legs weaken, and he sank into the leather chair. His mind raced backward through time, to a version of himself that seemed like a different person entirely. He had been 14 years old, the son of a construction worker and a seamstress, living in a modest neighborhood on the other side of the city. Grace Morrison had been his neighbor, his best friend, and his first love. "Your mother," Marcus said slowly, trying to process this impossible revelation. "She lived on Maple Street, the yellow house with the porch swing." Rose nodded slowly, confusion and concern etched on her face. "Yes, but that was a long time ago. We moved away when I was just a baby. Mr. Wellington, are you all right? Should I call for Mrs. Patterson?" "No," Marcus said firmly, though his voice trembled. "No, please. Sit down. I need to know. Tell me about your mother." Rose hesitated, then, perched on the edge of a nearby chair, still clutching her duster. "I don't understand what's happening, sir." "Neither do I, entirely," Marcus admitted. "But that bracelet. I made it. I gave it to Grace Morrison when we were 14 years old. I promised her that I would love her forever, that we would build a life together. And then, everything fell apart." The memories flooded back with painful clarity. Grace had been the light in his difficult adolescence. While other kids had mocked his worn clothes and his family's financial struggles, Grace had seen something in him. She had believed in his dreams when he talked about someday building something great, about lifting himself and his family out of poverty. They had spent countless hours together, studying in the library, walking through the park, planning a future that seemed impossible, but beautiful. "What happened?" Rose asked softly, drawn into the story despite her confusion. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of vulnerability he rarely displayed. "My father got a job opportunity in another state. Better pay, better prospects for the family. We had to move suddenly. I was 15. I promised Grace I would come back for her, that I would write, that distance wouldn't matter. But life had other plans." He paused, the weight of old regrets pressing down on him. "My father died 6 months after we moved. A construction accident. My mother was devastated, barely able to function. At 15, I became the man of the house. I had to drop out of school, take multiple jobs to support my mother and younger sister. Every day was about survival. I tried to write to Grace, but the letters came back unopened. Her family had moved, and I had no way to find her." Rose listened intently, her initial wariness gradually giving way to empathy. "My mother never talked much about her past. She raised me alone. I never knew my father." Marcus looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "My mother got pregnant young. Very young. The man disappeared, wanted nothing to do with us. She was 16 when she had me. Her parents kicked her out, called her shameful. She struggled for years, working multiple jobs, trying to give me a good life despite everything. A terrible suspicion began forming in Marcus's mind. When is your birthday? October 15th. I just turned 27. Marcus did the mental calculation, his hands beginning to shake. 27 years ago, 9 months after he had left. The last time he and Grace had seen each other, they had been young, in love, and reckless. They had made promises and shared intimacy that neither fully understood the consequences of. Oh God, Marcus whispered. It's possible. It's entirely possible. Rose stood up abruptly. What are you saying? I'm saying that your mother and we were together before I left. We were so young, so naive. If she found out she was pregnant after I was gone, if she tried to reach me but couldn't, if her parents reacted the way you described, the implications hung in the air between them. Marcus looked at Rose with new eyes, searching her face for familiar features. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, even her determined expression when she had been working, they all reminded him of himself at that age. This is insane, Rose said, backing away slightly. You can't just appear out of nowhere and suggest that you're my father. My mother never said anything, never even hinted. Maybe she thought I had abandoned her, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. Maybe she tried to find me and couldn't. My family moved, changed phone numbers. We were scrambling just to survive. Grace would have had no way to reach me. Rose shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. No, this is too much. I came here to work, to earn money for my nursing degree. I don't need this complication in my life. Please, Marcus said, standing up. Please don't leave. I know this is overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me too. But that bracelet, your mother's name, the timeline, everything fits. At least let me try to understand what happened. For Grace's sake, if nothing else. Rose wiped her eyes roughly. My mother worked herself to death. 3 jobs at the end, trying to pay for my education, trying to give me opportunities she never had. She never complained, never asked anyone for help. She was the strongest person I ever knew. Marcus felt tears streaming down his own face, something that hadn't happened in years. That sounds exactly like the Grace I knew. Proud, strong, determined. I loved her so much. I never stopped thinking about her, wondering what happened to her, if she was happy. She wasn't happy, Rose said bluntly. She was exhausted and alone and struggling every single day. And then she got sick. Cancer. We couldn't afford the best treatments. I watched her fade away over 18 months, still trying to smile, still telling me everything would be all right. The guilt crashed over Marcus like a physical wave. While he had been building his empire, accumulating billions, the girl he had loved had been suffering. If Rose was his daughter, then his child had grown up in poverty while he lived in luxury. The irony was devastating. I didn't know, Marcus said helplessly. I swear I didn't know. That doesn't change anything, Rose replied. But her voice had softened slightly. It doesn't bring her back. It doesn't undo all those years of struggle. They stood in silence, 2 strangers connected by a bracelet and a ghost, trying to process revelations that had upended both of their worlds. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky. An entire night had passed in what felt like moments. I want to know the truth, Marcus finally said. We can do a DNA test. It's simple, fast. If you are my daughter, then everything changes. Everything. Rose looked at him skeptically. Why? Why would it matter to you? You've built this life without us. You have everything you could possibly want. Marcus looked around at his library, filled with first editions and priceless collections. He thought about his mansion, his cars, his private jet, all the trappings of success he had accumulated. And he realized that Rose was wrong. He didn't have everything. He had nothing that truly mattered. Because, he said quietly, I've spent 28 years building an empire, and only now do I realize I built it on the ruins of the only thing that ever really mattered to me. If you're my daughter, if Grace carried my child and raised her alone while I was too consumed with survival and then success to even try to find her, then I owe you both more than I could ever repay. Rose studied his face, looking for deception or manipulation. But all she saw was genuine anguish and regret. One test, she said finally. One DNA test. But that's all I'm promising. I don't need a father. I've done fine without one for 27 years. Marcus nodded, understanding that he would have to earn any place in her life. One test. And, whatever the results, I want to help you finish your nursing degree. It's the least I can do to honor your mother's memory. The DNA test results arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by courier in a plain manila envelope. Marcus had been in a board meeting when his assistant interrupted, something she knew better than to do unless it was absolutely critical. He had excused himself, claiming an urgent family matter, which drew surprised looks from the board members. Marcus Wellington didn't have family. Everyone knew that. In his office, Marcus held the envelope with trembling hands. 3 days had passed since that night in the library, 3 days during which he had barely slept or eaten. He had replayed every memory of Grace, every moment they had shared, trying to reconcile the innocent love of his youth with the catastrophic consequences of his departure. He tore open the envelope and pulled out the single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the scientific terminology, the percentages, the technical explanations, until he found the conclusion printed in bold letters. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. Rose Henderson was his daughter, the young woman who had been dusting his library, whom he had walked past without a second glance, carried his DNA. Grace had been pregnant when he left, had carried their child, had given birth alone, and, scared at 16 years old, had raised their daughter through poverty and struggle while he had been absent. The weight of this knowledge threatened to crush him. He had missed everything. Her first steps, her first words, her first day of school, her graduation, all the milestones that defined a life. He had been absent for all of it, not through choice, but through ignorance, which somehow made it worse. Marcus called Mrs. Patterson. "Where is Rose working today?" "In the East Wing, sir, cleaning the guest suites." "Is there a problem?" "No." "Yes. I need to speak with her. Send her to my office immediately." 20 minutes later, Rose appeared at his office door. She was still in her work uniform, her hair tied back in a practical bun. She looked composed, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the doorframe. "The results came," Marcus said, holding up the paper. Rose nodded slowly. "I received my copy this morning. So you know, I know what the science says. That doesn't change anything about who I am or how I was raised." Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit. We need to talk about what happens now." Rose remained standing. "I told you I don't need charity. I have a job. I'm working my way through school. The test doesn't change my plans." "Rose, please," Marcus said, his carefully maintained composure cracking. "I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But we need to figure this out together. You're my daughter, my only child. That means something to me, even if it doesn't mean anything to you." "It's not that it doesn't mean anything," Rose said, finally, moving into the room and sitting down. "It's that I don't know what it's supposed to mean. I've lived 27 years without a father. My mother did everything. She was my whole world. And now I'm supposed to accept that the richest man I've ever met, who lives in a house bigger than my entire neighborhood, is my father? It doesn't feel real." Marcus leaned forward. "Tell me about her. About Grace. I need to know what her life was like." Rose was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "My earliest memories are of her working. She was always working. During the day, she cleaned offices downtown. At night, she waitressed at a diner. On weekends, she took in sewing and alterations. Our apartment was tiny, one bedroom that we shared until I was 12, and she insisted I take the bedroom while she slept on the couch." She paused, her voice thickening with emotion. "She never dated, never had time for herself. Every penny went to keeping us fed, clothed, and in a safe neighborhood. When I was old enough to understand, I asked her about my father. She said he was someone from her past, someone who had loved her once, but couldn't be there. She never spoke badly about him. She just said circumstances had pulled you apart." Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. "She was protecting me. Even after everything, she was protecting my memory. Or protecting me from disappointment," Rose countered. "Maybe she thought if you had known about me, you would have come back. Maybe she couldn't bear to tell me that you had known and chosen not to be there." "But I didn't know," Marcus insisted. "If I had known, everything would have been different. I would have found a way to be there, to help, to support you both." "Would you?" Rose asked sharply. You were 15, fighting to keep your own family afloat after your father died. What could you have done? And, later, when you were building your empire, would you have stopped to search for us? Or would the pursuit of success have been too consuming? The questions hit Marcus like physical blows because they were fair. He wanted to say that he would have done everything differently, that he would have prioritized finding grace above all else. But the truth was, he didn't know. The Marcus Wellington who had clawed his way out of poverty had been ruthless, focused, willing to sacrifice anything for success. Would that version of himself have made room for a teenage girlfriend and an unexpected child? I can't change the past, Marcus finally said. But I can do something about the future. Your future. I have resources, connections, opportunities. Let me help you. How? Rose asked. By throwing money at me? By clearing the path so I never have to struggle? My mother's struggles made her strong. They made me strong. I don't want to be handed everything. I'm not talking about handing you everything, Marcus said, frustration creeping into his voice. But there's a difference between earning your way and suffering unnecessarily. You're working as a maid and putting yourself through nursing school. That's admirable. But what if you could focus on your studies instead of splitting your energy between school and multiple jobs? What if you could graduate without crushing debt? What if you could honor your mother's sacrifices by actually achieving the dreams she worked so hard to make possible for you? Rose looked conflicted. I don't know if I can accept that. It feels wrong. What feels wrong is that my daughter has been struggling while I've been accumulating wealth I don't even need, Marcus shot back. What feels wrong is that Grace died working 3 jobs while I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What feels wrong is that you're here cleaning my house when you should be family. But I'm not family, Rose said quietly. Not really. Family is built through years of love and support and presence. You can't buy your way into that. Marcus slumped back in his chair, defeated. You're right. But can you at least give me a chance to try? Not to buy your affection, but to build something real between us? Let me get to know you. Let me understand who you are, what you want from life, what your dreams are. Let me be present moving forward, even if I couldn't be present before. Rose studied him carefully. Why does this matter so much to you? You've built this entire life without us. Why change now? Marcus thought about how to answer, how to articulate the emptiness that had been growing inside him for years. Do you know what it's like to have everything and feel nothing? To achieve every goal you set and still feel incomplete? I've spent decades building an empire, and I did it because I thought success would heal the wounds of my childhood poverty. I thought if I accumulated enough wealth, enough power, enough respect, I would finally feel whole. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at his kingdom of glass and steel. But it didn't work. Every success felt hollow. Every achievement felt meaningless. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that distracted me from the emptiness. And now I know why. I built everything on a foundation of loss. I lost Grace, and I never recovered from that. And discovering that she had been raising our daughter, struggling while I prospered, it's broken something in me. Or maybe it's fixed something. I don't know anymore. Rose joined him at the window. My mother used to say that money can't buy the things that matter. Love, integrity, purpose. She had so little, but she was rich in the ways that counted. She sounds like an incredible woman, Marcus said softly. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for her. For you. I can't undo that. But maybe, if you'll let me, I can make sure her legacy continues. Her strength, her values, her love. Let me help you honor her memory by supporting your dreams. Rose was silent for a long time, wrestling with her feelings. Finally, she spoke. If I agree to this, I need conditions. I'm not moving into this mansion. I'm not quitting my job immediately. I'm not becoming some socialite daughter who shows up at galas and charity events. I'm going to finish my degree on my terms, working for what I achieve. Agreed, Marcus said quickly. And I want to know about her. About my mother when she was young. I want to know the Grace Morrison you fell in love with. I want to understand what her life was like before everything went wrong. Marcus nodded. I can do that. I want to do that. And you can't tell anyone about this. Not yet. I need time to process this, to figure out what it means. I don't want to be thrust into your world without understanding what I'm stepping into. Whatever you need. Marcus agreed. Rose turned to face him directly. I'll let you pay for school. But I'm keeping my job, at least part-time. I need to maintain my independence. And we'll spend time together, but on a schedule that works for both of us. This isn't going to be a fairy tale where the poor girl discovers her rich father and everything becomes perfect. Real relationships take work. I understand, Marcus said, and I'm willing to put in that work. As much as it takes. They stood together at the window, two people connected by blood and loss, trying to find a way forward. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the personal drama unfolding in the penthouse office. Over the following weeks, a careful routine developed. Rose continued working part-time while attending her nursing classes full-time, her tuition now paid by a scholarship from a foundation that Marcus had quietly funded. She insisted on paying for her own apartment and living expenses, though Marcus made sure the scholarship included a generous stipend for books and supplies. They met twice a week for dinner, sometimes at Marcus's mansion, but more often at small restaurants around the city where they could talk without the formal atmosphere of his estate. During these meals, Marcus told Rose about Grace as he had known her, painting a picture of a vibrant, intelligent girl who had dreams of becoming a teacher and who had seen beauty in things other people overlooked. She loved old movies. Marcus remembered one evening over Italian food at a family-run trattoria. The classics from the 40s and 50s. She said they reminded her that love could be simple and pure, not complicated by all the noise of modern life. We used to watch them together on her parents' old television when they were out. Rose smiled. She kept that love. We watched old movies together all the time. It was our special thing, especially when I was sick or sad. She'd make popcorn, and we'd curl up on the couch and escape into those black and white worlds for a few hours. What was her favorite? Marcus asked. Casablanca. She must have seen it 100 times. She used to quote the lines, especially the ending. We'll always have Paris. I never understood why that line made her cry until now. Marcus felt his throat tighten. We used to say we'd always have Maple Street. Our version of Paris. A time and place that belonged just to us, even if life pulled us in different directions. These shared memories of Grace became the bridge between them, allowing them to build a connection despite the missing years. Rose began to see Marcus not as a distant billionaire but as a man who had genuinely loved her mother, whose absence had been circumstantial rather than chosen. Marcus began to see Rose not as a reminder of his failures, but as a living testament to Grace's strength and love. But tension still arose. One evening, Marcus made the mistake of sending a car to pick Rose up from work. She arrived at dinner furious. I told you I didn't want special treatment, she said, barely waiting until they were seated. Half my coworkers saw that car. They're asking questions I'm not ready to answer. I just wanted to make sure you were safe, Marcus defended. That neighborhood isn't great after dark. That neighborhood is where I've lived for the past 5 years, Rose shot back. I've managed to stay safe without a private car service. You can't just swoop in and decide what I need. Marcus held up his hands in surrender. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm learning how to do this. And I'm going to make mistakes. But, please, tell me when I overstep instead of letting resentment build. Rose took a deep breath, calming herself. It's hard. You have all this power and wealth, and it's so easy for you to just make things happen. But I need to feel like I have control over my own life. My mother fought so hard to give me that, and I won't let it be taken away, even with good intentions. I understand, Marcus said, and I respect that. But you need to understand something too. For me, providing and protecting is how I show love. It's how I was raised. When my father died, I took care of my family by working, by solving problems, by making things better materially. That's my instinct. I'm trying to learn other ways, but it's not natural to me. This honesty helped Rose understand Marcus better. His wealth wasn't just about success or status. It was armor against the poverty and helplessness he had experienced as a teenager. By accumulating resources, he had been protecting himself and trying to protect others from ever feeling that vulnerable again. As spring turned to summer, their relationship deepened. Marcus introduced Rose to his business gradually, not as an heiress, but as someone he wanted to understand his world. She sat in on meetings occasionally, observing how he operated, how he made decisions that affected thousands of people. She was surprised by his thoughtfulness, the way he considered the human impact of his choices, not just the financial outcomes. "You're not what I expected," she admitted one day as they walked through one of his manufacturing facilities. "The way you talk to employees, ask about their families, remember details about their lives. I thought billionaires just saw people as numbers." "Some do," Marcus acknowledged. "But I've been at the bottom. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be just a worker that management doesn't care about. I swore if I ever had power, I'd use it differently." Rose also began to see how lonely his life had been. The mansion was beautiful, but empty. His social circle consisted primarily of business associates and people who wanted something from him. He had casual acquaintances, but no real friends, no one he could be vulnerable with. "Don't you ever get tired of being alone?" she asked one evening. Marcus looked around his study, lined with books and expensive art. "I got used to it. After my mother passed away 15 years ago, after my sister moved to Europe with her family, I just accepted that my life was my work. Romance was too complicated, too risky. I'd been burned once, losing Grace, and I didn't want to experience that pain again. So I built walls. Very expensive, very high walls." "That's sad," Rose said simply. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "It is. But now, slowly, those walls were coming down." Rose was showing him what he had missed, what he had sacrificed in his pursuit of success. Through her eyes, he saw his accomplishments differently, understanding that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in connections, in love, in the impact you had on individual lives. One night, Rose brought a photo album to dinner, one her mother had kept. As they looked through the pictures, Marcus saw Grace at different ages, saw Rose growing up, saw the small apartment, and the modest celebrations, the birthday cakes made from scratch, and the handmade decorations. "She saved everything," Rose explained. "Every card I made her, every drawing, every school paper. She kept them all in boxes under her bed. After she died, I found them. Years of memories, carefully preserved." Marcus touched a photo of Grace holding infant Rose, both of them in a tiny hospital room. Grace looked exhausted, but radiant, her love for her daughter evident in every line of her face. "She was beautiful," he whispered, "and so happy despite everything. She loved being a mother," Rose said. "It was hard, but she never regretted having me. She told me that all the time. I was her purpose, her joy, her reason for everything." As Marcus looked at these captured moments of a life he hadn't been part of, he felt both profound grief and unexpected gratitude. Grief for what he had lost, but gratitude that Grace had found happiness in motherhood, that she had given Rose the love and support that had shaped her into this remarkable woman. The bracelet that had started everything sat on the table between them, next to the photo album. Grace's bracelet, the symbol of a teenage promise that had somehow survived decades and circumstances to bring father and daughter together. "What do you think she would say?" Marcus asked. "If she could see us now, what would Grace say about this?" Rose thought carefully. "I think she'd be happy. Cautiously happy. She'd want to make sure you weren't going to hurt me, that this wasn't just guilt or obligation driving you. But if she believed you genuinely cared, if she saw that we were building something real, I think she'd be pleased. She never stopped wearing that bracelet, never stopped keeping it safe. Maybe part of her always hoped that somehow, someday, it would bring us together." Marcus picked up the bracelet, feeling the weight of history in his 6 months had passed since the night Marcus had seen the bracelet, and the transformation in his life was profound. Rose had graduated from nursing school with honors, walking across the stage to receive her degree while Marcus watched from the audience, tears streaming down his face. It was the first graduation he had attended since his own high school ceremony decades ago, and seeing his daughter achieve this milestone filled him with a pride he hadn't known was possible. After the ceremony, Rose had introduced him to her friends and professors, not as her employer but as her father. It was the first time she had publicly acknowledged their relationship, and Marcus had felt something shift in his chest, a wall crumbling that he hadn't even realized was still standing. "Dad, this is Professor Martinez," Rose had said, the word dad falling naturally from her lips for the first time. "She's been my mentor throughout the program." Marcus had shaken the professor's hand, barely able to speak around the lump in his throat. Rose had called him dad. In that moment, all the money in the world meant nothing compared to that single word. Now, sitting in his office on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. The office itself looked different. Where there had once been only business documents and financial reports, there were now framed photos. Rose at graduation, a picture of Grace from her youth that Rose had given him, photos of the two of them at various dinners and outings. His assistant had remarked on the change, noting that Mr. Wellington seemed more human these days, more approachable. Rose entered the office carrying a large box, her face serious. "I need to show you something," she said without preamble. "I've been putting this off, but I think it's time." Marcus gestured to the couch. "What is it?" Rose set the box down and opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of letters, yellowed with age, tied together with faded ribbon. "I found these in my mother's things after she died. I couldn't read them then. It was too painful. But last week, I finally opened them." She handed him the stack. Marcus untied the ribbon with trembling hands and looked at the first envelope. His breath caught. It was addressed to him, in care of his old address, marked "Return to Sender." "She wrote to you," Rose said softly. "For years, she wrote to you. She tried to find you, to tell you about me, to reconnect. But the letters always came back. Your family had moved, and she didn't know where." Marcus opened the first letter, dated 9 months after he had left. The handwriting was Grace's, the same neat script he remembered from their school days. "Dear Marcus," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever get this letter, but I have to try. I have something important to tell you. Something that will change everything. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby. I'm scared and I don't know what to do, but I needed you to know. Please, if you get this, write back. I need you. Love, Grace." Marcus felt his vision blur. He opened another letter, this one dated 3 months later. "Dear Marcus, I wrote before but haven't heard back. Maybe you didn't get my letter. I'm 6 months pregnant now. My parents kicked me out when they found out. I'm staying with a friend, working at a diner to save money. I still believe in the promises we made. I still believe you'd want to know about our child. Please respond. Please. Grace." Letter after letter told the story of Grace's struggle, her hope gradually fading as weeks turned to months, and then years with no response. Some letters included photos, Grace pregnant, then holding newborn Rose, then toddler Rose taking her first steps. Each letter was a window into the life Marcus had missed, the family he had unknowingly abandoned. "She wrote every few months for 7 years, Rose explained, her voice thick with emotion. "Even after it became clear you weren't getting the letters, she kept writing. She said it was like talking to you, keeping you updated on my life. She'd tell you about my first day of kindergarten, my favorite foods, the things I said that made her laugh. It was her way of keeping you present, even though you were absent." Marcus was openly weeping now, something he hadn't done since that first night with the bracelet. "I never got them. If I had known, if I had received even one of these letters, everything would have been different. I would have come back. I would have found a way to help." "I know," Rose said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. "Reading these letters, I finally understood. She didn't keep them to torture herself or to hold a grudge. She kept them as proof that she tried, that she did everything possible to reach you. And maybe as evidence for me someday. So I'd know that my father wasn't a villain who abandoned us, but someone who genuinely didn't know." Marcus carefully set the letters down, afraid his shaking hands would damage them. "She was protecting me. Even in these letters, even when she's describing how hard things are, she never speaks badly about me. She keeps making excuses, keeps believing the best." "That was my mother," Rose said with a sad smile. "She always believed in people's better nature. Even when the world gave her every reason to become bitter, she chose hope. She chose love." They sat together in silence. The letters spread between them like artifacts from an archaeological dig, pieces of a past that shaped their present. Marcus picked up one of the photos, a picture of 3-year-old Rose covered in what appeared to be paint, grinning at the camera. "Tell me about this," he said. Rose smiled at the memory her mother must have shared with her. "I got into her makeup, apparently. She'd been working a double shift and came home exhausted, and I'd found her lipsticks and eyeshadows and created what she called modern art on myself and the bathroom wall. She said she wanted to be angry but couldn't stop laughing. She was a good mother, Marcus said. The best, Rose agreed. And she did it all alone. But here's what I've realized reading these letters. She didn't want to be alone. She wanted you there. She wanted me to have a father. She tried so hard to make that happen. It's not your fault you didn't get the letters, but it's also not her fault that you weren't there. Sometimes circumstances just align against people. Marcus nodded slowly. I've spent the last 6 months feeling guilty, feeling like I failed her and you. And I did, in a way. But you're right. We were victims of circumstance, of bad timing, of a world that didn't make it easy for a teenage mother to track down a boy whose family had disappeared. She would want you to forgive yourself, Rose said. In one of the last letters she wrote, when I was 7, she said, wherever Marcus is, whatever he's become, I hope he's happy. I hope life has been kind to him. And I hope someday, somehow, he and Rose will find each other. She deserves to know her father. And he deserves to know what a wonderful daughter we created together. Marcus pressed his hands to his face, overwhelmed by Grace's generosity of spirit. I don't deserve that forgiveness. Maybe not, Rose said bluntly. But you have it anyway. That's what grace is. The thing you don't deserve, but receive anyway. My mother literally embodied her name. This moment of understanding felt like a turning point. Marcus had been carrying such heavy guilt, such profound regret. And while those feelings didn't disappear, they became more manageable knowing that Grace herself would have forgiven him, would have wanted him to move forward rather than remain trapped in the past. Over the next few weeks, Marcus made several decisions that surprised everyone who knew him. First, he established the Grace Morrison Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to helping single mothers access education, healthcare, and career opportunities. He personally funded it with $50 million, with plans to contribute more each year. This isn't about easing my guilt, he explained to Rose when he showed her the paperwork. It's about making sure other women don't have to struggle the way your mother did. It's about creating the support system Grace should have had. Rose had cried when she saw the foundation documents, particularly the mission statement that quoted her mother. Every child deserves to know both parents, and every parent deserves the resources to give their child a good life. Second, Marcus restructured his work schedule. He had spent decades putting in 12-hour days, 7 days a week, treating his business as the only thing that mattered. Now, he blocked off time for Rose, time that was inviolable regardless of what deals or meetings might come up. His board was shocked when he declined a crucial negotiation in Tokyo because it conflicted with Rose's first day at her new nursing job. Family comes first, he had told them simply. I learned that lesson too late, but I learned it thoroughly. Third, and most surprisingly, Marcus started therapy. Rose had suggested it during one of their dinners, noting that he seemed to be carrying unprocessed trauma from his childhood and his loss of Grace. At first, Marcus had been resistant, seeing therapy as a weakness or an indulgence. But Rose had been firm. You've spent your whole life building walls, she had said. Now you're trying to connect with people, starting with me. But you can't really connect if you don't understand your own emotions and patterns. Therapy isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do. Dr. Sarah Chun became Marcus's therapist, meeting with him twice a week to work through his complex feelings about his past, his success, and his relationship with Rose. Through therapy, Marcus began to understand how his childhood poverty had driven every decision he made, how the loss of Grace had shaped his inability to form close relationships, how his relentless pursuit of wealth had been an attempt to outrun his feelings of powerlessness and abandonment. You built an empire, Dr. Chun observed during one session, but you built it in isolation. You were so afraid of being vulnerable, of depending on anyone or letting anyone depend on you, that you created a life where you didn't need anyone. And then you wondered why you felt empty. I had everything, Marcus said, and nothing. The classic cliché. Not a cliché, Dr. Chin corrected. A common human experience. We think we can substitute achievement for connection, success for love. But we can't. You're learning that now, thanks to Rose. Rose herself was navigating her own complicated feelings. She had started working as a nurse at a community hospital, the same hospital where her mother had received her cancer treatment. It was an intentional choice, a way of honoring Grace's memory by helping others in the place where she had spent her final months. But, being Marcus Wellington's daughter, even though they had kept it quiet, began to change things. Word leaked out eventually, as word always does. Suddenly, Rose found herself treated differently by colleagues who recognized the Wellington name. People who assumed she had gotten her position through nepotism rather than merit. It's frustrating, she vented to Marcus over dinner one evening. I worked so hard for this. I earned my degree. I passed my boards with high scores. I interviewed well. But now people look at me and see your daughter first, nurse second. I'm sorry, Marcus said. I know that's my fault. It's not about fault, Rose sighed. It's just reality. Your wealth and position cast a long shadow. I'm trying to step out of it and be my own person, but it's not easy. Marcus thought for a moment. What if we went public? Really public. Not hiding our relationship, but being honest about it. Tell the story of Grace, of the bracelet, of how we found each other. Take control of the narrative instead of letting others speculate. Rose looked uncertain. I don't know. That feels like inviting a lot of attention and scrutiny. It is, Marcus agreed. But right now you're dealing with whispers and assumptions. If we tell the truth, at least it's our truth. And maybe it could help other people. Single mothers who think they're alone. Kids who grew up without fathers. People who think family has to look a certain way. Rose considered this. It would honor my mother's story too. Let people know what she overcame, what she achieved. She was invisible her whole life. Just another struggling woman nobody noticed. This would make her visible. They decided to do a single interview with a respected journalist, telling the complete story from beginning to end. Marcus's publicist nearly had a heart attack when he informed her, warning about the potential media frenzy and the impact on his business reputation. But Marcus was firm. This is the most important thing I've ever done, he told her. More important than any deal, any acquisition, any business decision. This is about truth and family. Set it up. The interview aired on a Sunday evening in prime time. Marcus and Rose sat together, holding hands, as they told their story. They talked about teenage love and unexpected pregnancy, about families torn apart by circumstance, about letters that never reached their destination. They discussed poverty and struggle, success and emptiness, and the miraculous moment when a bracelet had revealed the truth. Rose spoke eloquently about her mother, about Grace's strength and sacrifice, about growing up with love, but without resources. Marcus was honest about his regrets, his guilt, and his determination to make amends by living differently going forward. They showed photos of Grace, including one where she wore the bracelet, and they displayed the bracelet itself, explaining its significance as the thread that had connected 3 lives across time. The response was overwhelming. The foundation received thousands of applications from single mothers seeking assistance. Marcus's business partners reached out, many sharing their own stories of absent parents or struggling families. Rose's hospital received donations in Grace's memory, funding for a new oncology wing that would provide free treatment to uninsured patients. But more than the practical outcomes, the interview sparked conversations about family, about the different ways people find each other, about forgiveness and second chances. Marcus received a letter from his sister in Europe, whom he hadn't spoken to in years, saying she was proud of him for finally letting people in. Rose heard from college classmates and childhood friends, many sharing their own complicated family stories. One particularly moving response came from an elderly woman who wrote to say she had been a teenager with Grace, had known her in the months after Marcus left, had been one of the friends who took her in when her parents kicked her out. Grace was the strongest person I ever knew, the woman wrote. She loved you until the day she died, Marcus. She kept that bracelet close to her heart always. When she was sick at the end, when the pain was terrible, she would hold that bracelet and remember better times. She told me once that she regretted many things in her life, but she never regretted loving you, and she never regretted having Rose. Those were the 2 pure things in her life, she said. I hope you and Rose can build something beautiful together. Grace would want that. Marcus framed that letter and hung it in his office, next to the photos of Rose and Grace. It was a reminder that love, real love, endures beyond logic or fairness or circumstance. Grace had loved him when he was a poor teenager with nothing to offer. She had loved him through his absence and her struggle. She had loved him enough to forgive him, to hope for his happiness, to wish for him, and Rose to reunite. As the months turned into a year, the relationship between Marcus and Rose deepened and matured. They had moved past the awkward beginning, past the anger and guilt, into something real and solid. They had family dinners, not just the two of them, but with Rose's friends and eventually with Marcus's sister when she visited from Europe. The mansion, once cold and empty, began to feel like a home. Rose moved into one of the guest houses on the estate, finally, accepting that she didn't have to prove her independence by struggling unnecessarily. She decorated it with photos of Grace, with mementos from her childhood, making it her own space while still being close to her father. Marcus loved having her near, loved knowing she was safe and comfortable, loved the opportunity to see her regularly. They developed traditions. Saturday morning breakfast together, no matter what. Monthly visits to Grace's grave, where they would update her on their lives, tell her about the foundation's work, share their triumphs and struggles. Holiday dinners that honored both Grace's humble traditions and Marcus's newfound appreciation for family gatherings. Marcus also changed professionally. While he remained CEO of Wellington Industries, he became known for his advocacy for family-friendly policies, for paid parental leave, for resources supporting employees who were single parents. His board meetings now included discussions about corporate social responsibility that went beyond public relations. He used his wealth and influence to push for changes that would have helped Grace if they had existed when she needed them. Rose thrived in her nursing career, becoming known for her compassion and skill, earning respect that had nothing to do with her father's name. She specialized in oncology, working with cancer patients the way she wished someone had been able to do more for her mother. She often used her own story to comfort patients and families, showing them that hope could exist even in difficult circumstances. On the anniversary of the night Marcus had seen the bracelet, they returned to the library where it had all begun. The room looked the same, but everything was different. They were different. I think about that night all the time, Rose said, running her hand along the bookshelf she had been dusting when Marcus first saw the bracelet. How close we came to never connecting. If I had been assigned to a different part of the house, if you had gone to bed earlier, if the bracelet had been hidden under my sleeve. But none of those things happened, Marcus said. Grace made sure that bracelet survived, made sure you kept it, made sure it was visible at the exact right moment. I don't believe in fate usually, but I believe in this. I believe she brought us together. Rose pulled the bracelet from her pocket. She still carried it with her every day, a talisman connecting her to both parents, to a love story that had endured against all odds. What do you think she would say if she could see us now? Marcus smiled. I think she'd say she always knew. That love finds a way, even when it seems impossible. That the bracelet she treasured did exactly what it was meant to do, brought her daughter to her father, and gave us both a second chance at family. They stood together in the library, surrounded by books and memories, and Marcus realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire adult life. Not success or wealth or power, but connection, love, family. The things that Grace had known mattered most, the things that couldn't be bought or built or controlled. Thank you, he said to Rose, for giving me a chance, for letting me into your life, for teaching me what really matters. Rose hugged him tightly. Thank you for being willing to learn, for honoring my mother, for becoming the father you didn't get to be when I was growing up. The bracelet rested between them, that simple creation of leather and silver that had traveled through time to deliver its message. In the end, it had done more than survive. It had triumphed. It had taken teenage love and transformed it into adult redemption, taken loss and transformed it into gain, taken separate lives and woven them together. Marcus Wellington, the billionaire who had thought he had everything, had been broken down by a black maid's bracelet. But, in that breaking, he had been rebuilt into something better. Not the isolated tycoon who measured success in dollars, but a father who measured success in relationships, in love, in the legacy of a remarkable woman named Grace who had known all along what truly mattered in life. And, somewhere, Marcus liked to think, Grace was smiling. Her bracelet had come home at last, and, with it, the family she had always dreamed of had finally come together. Hands. I made this when I was just a kid, thinking I was making something that would last forever. I had no idea how right I was. This little piece of leather and metal survived everything. It's more durable than any empire I've built. Love is like that, Rose said softly. It endures when everything else falls apart. My mother taught me that. She had so little, but her love was infinite. And now I'm learning that maybe that love is still working, still bringing good things, even after she's gone. They sat together in the expensive restaurant, surrounded by wealthy patrons who would never understand the journey that had brought them to this moment. A billionaire and a nursing student, a father and daughter connected by loss and finding their way towards something new. I don't want charity, Rose said firmly. It's not charity. It's an apology. A small one, inadequate for everything your mother went through, but it's a start. As Rose left the library to finish her shift, Marcus remained in the chair, still clutching the image of that bracelet in his mind. The simple piece of jewelry he had made with teenage hands, given with young love, had traveled through time to deliver a message he had never expected to receive. The sun rose over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Marcus Wellington, the billionaire who had conquered industries and accumulated vast wealth, sat alone in his library and wept for the life he had lost, the love he had abandoned, and the daughter he never knew existed. The bracelet had broken down his carefully constructed walls in a way that no business deal or market crash ever could. Everything he thought he knew about his life, about his choices, about his success, was now cast in a different light. And he had no idea if he would ever be able to make things right.